What's up, everybody? Welcome back to our Kratom Addiction and Recovery Daily Devotional series. So we are in Exodus chapter 32, and we've been breaking down everything in this chapter. And it's been really cool to talk about and relate different aspects of this chapter to our lives and where we're at in our recovery process. And so yesterday we talked about worship in the wilderness. And today we're going to get into the marrow of this study of Exodus chapter 2, which is idolatry. And I read this book, Redemption, Freed by Jesus from the Idols We Worship and the Wounds That We Carry by Mike Wilkerson, when I was in the first parts of my kratom quit and recovery. And I was also reading the book of Exodus at the same time, and I gained so much insight, and it helped me in my recovery process as well as moving forward in my life. And so I think it's really cool to be able to break this down together. And today we're gonna be talking about what is an idol. And this is heavy stuff, like I've been giving you guys the heads up about. This is not easy a lot of times when we're in our addictions and in our recoveries to look at things about ourselves that can be really tough. Nobody wants to focus on what's wrong with themselves. And it's difficult, especially when we're coming out of addiction or we're still in addiction, and there's a lot of shame and a lot of pain that's going on as well. A lot of us caused a lot of damage in our life because of our addictions, our careers, our families, our relationships, our health were affected by our addictions. And for a lot of times, we couldn't really help it. You know, our addiction started to take over in our lives, and there was a wake of destruction that happened in its path. And so a lot of us feel a lot of shame and guilt and pain from that. And so I just want to let you know that I understand, and I went through that myself. And it was really hard for me when I first quit kratom, especially, to look back on all the damage that had been done and to look at myself and go, okay, what was my part in this? Because something about kratom, and I think it's with all addictions, because I got it slightly with weed, but I got it really intensely from kratom, that I just wasn't able to look at myself and see my part in situations. I would 100% look at other people and blame other people and become overly critical of others. And so when it came down to getting sober and getting free from kratom, I really had to take a hard look at myself. And in the 12-step program, there is a step where you take what they call a fearless moral inventory of yourself and your life and your relationships and everything about you. And 12-step programs I never really jived with, but I still read the steps and I read their literature. And that program does help a lot of people. I wasn't, like I said, I didn't really vibe with it. But there is value in a lot of the steps in the process that they use for people getting sober. And so one of those things being the fearless moral inventory is really a valuable thing. And obviously I don't call it, the way that the 12 steps call it. I just, call it taking a look at yourself. And there's going to definitely be a point in your sobriety process, in your recovery process, where you're going to need to do this. And the reason why we need to do it is because to be sober, we have to feel good about ourselves and our lives and our relationships. Because when we don't, that's a lot of times what will drive some of us to use. Because when we feel that anger and that pain and that resentment, either towards ourselves or to others, it really creates a lot of inner turmoil. And so to be sober, we need to feel at peace with a lot of things. And taking that moral inventory of who we are, what we're about, how we deal with things, what the conflicts have been in our lives, what's going on in our relationships, that gives us the chance to take an honest look at ourselves and our lives and everything around us, so that we can pinpoint, okay, you know what, it wasn't cool that I did this, or I wasn't right when I said this to this person, or I wasn't right when, I did this when I was in my addiction. And then we take the steps thereafter to make it right in whatever capabilities that we can. Sometimes it's not possible to reconcile with people, meaning that we come back into a relationship with them. Sometimes it's best that, we don't have a relationship with people, but we still can, either take accountability or apologize for the things that we've done. And those are some examples of, making things right after we take an inventory of ourselves. So the first part of this inventory process for me was to identify the idols that I have in my life. And like I was saying, where we're at in Exodus is that God's people are now in the wilderness, and they're not sure how long they're going to be there. They're not sure, if God is even there. So what they do is they take all of their gold jewelry and they melt it down into the shape of a calf, which is an idol. They came from being enslaved in Egypt, where, Egypt's gods were these statues and these deities that they would worship. And so because God's people, didn't know any better, they went back to their old beliefs of when they were enslaved. And that's part of the reason why they built this statue, this idol to worship. So this is very relevant to our process and our recovery, because we have the tendency to do this. When we're in the wilderness and we're having a hard time, when we've quit kratom, and we don't know how long that we're going to have post-acute withdrawal stuff going on. And it's really hard, and it's really painful and sad for us. It's easy for us to look back to our enslavement to kratom and go, I did feel better there. And it's easy for us to idolize either kratom or different things about the old lives that we came from, to worship it in the meanwhile, until, God leads us out of the wilderness. So this is very relevant. So that's just a basic recap and going over the purpose of what idols are and why we're going to be learning about them. So today we're going to be reading from this book, and we're going to be reading the passage called "What is an Idol?" An idol is the exchange of truth for a lie, and it is the essence of idolatry. And idolatry in turn underlies all sin. Paul had the golden calf incident in mind when he penned the New Testament's definitive passage on idolatry, which says, "They exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worship and serve the creation rather than the Creator." To modern readers, the language of idolatry may seem primitive and irrelevant to immediate concerns such as addiction. But in fact, it is entirely relevant. According to Tim Keller in his book, Counterfeit Gods, the biblical concept of idolatry is an extremely sophisticated idea integrating intellectual, psychological, social, cultural, and spiritual categories. In other words, understanding idolatry helps us understand a great deal about what goes wrong with people. Keller offers several ways of defining idolatry. An idol is, and this is super important, an idol is anything more important to you than God. Anything that absorbs your heart and imagination more than God. Anything you seek to give you what only God can give. Whatever you look at and say in your heart of hearts, if I have that, then I'll feel my life has meaning. Then I'll know I have value. Then I'll feel significant and secure. And anything that becomes more fundamental than God to your happiness, meaning in life, and your identity. Man, that's heavy. That's heavy. Keller elaborates on a range of potential idols that affect and infect both individuals and whole cultures. Love, sex, money, power, addiction, and religion. In his novel, or actually, we're not going to read that part. Common idols that we have are craving love, acceptance, and attention of people. The variety of surface idols that are expressed in this single deep idol is surprisingly broad. Pornography, food, cutting, drugs, prostitution, theft, social striving, weight loss, and religion. An idol always lives in the heart before it is made visible by the hands. What the heart loves, the will chooses, and the mind justifies. We may not sculpt statues or fashion golden calves, but our hearts are nonetheless idol factories. As Ed Welch says, drugs and sex are the modern golden calves built by addicts to find meaning, power, or pleasure apart from God. Dang, y'all. Man, I just got covered in chills. This is deep, you guys. I know that this is not easy to look at. This, for me, when I first read this, and I said before, you know, your recovery doesn't end just because you make it years out of with not using kratom. I'm doing this study with you guys, and it's helping me to recognize things in myself too, because I read this 3 years ago. So this is really cool to be doing this. And y'all, this is deep. Like, this is the marrow of like a lot of our struggles. And so, okay, man, I'm going to go over some things, but this is really going to take some personal reflection and some quiet time on your end to really think about this. Because a lot of times we'll be, you know, doing this kind of thing, and we'll have these kind of things that we're worshiping and that come before God. And it's become so normal that we don't even realize it. So it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some prayer, and it's going to take humility going before God and asking him to show us as well. So some things that I want to go over really quick is that, like, yeah, I really encourage you not even to take a day to go over this. Like, I encourage you to take some serious time and think about these things. You know, like, what is more important to you than God? What absorbs your heart and your imagination more than God? What do you seek to give you what only God can give you? And what do you look at and say in your heart of hearts, if I have that, then I'll feel my life has meaning, and then I'll know I have value, and then I'll feel significant and secure. What is that for you? And then what is becoming more fundamental than God to your happiness, meaning in life, and your identity? That's heavy, y'all. That's heavy. For me, when I looked at myself, what I realized, and this was very hard, was not only was I worshiping kratom, and kratom had become an idol in my life, and weed had become an idol on an even deeper level, because that had become part of my identity. But I realized that I had been putting my son in that category of an idol. I love my son. I love my husband. I love my family. I feel so deeply, and I have such a fierce, strong love, a very loyal love for the people that I love. And I realized through looking at myself and looking, at this study to help guide me and going to God humbly, and I realized, like, wow, I had been putting my son before God. And so it helped me to realize that. And it helped me to realize that, I'm not into attention in the sense that I like to be looked at, but I like to be, I recognize, I like to be noticed for my abilities. I like to be, and I think a lot of this stems from having a rough childhood and never really getting that validation from my parents. And I've learned a lot about that over the years, but I've learned that, I used to make music. I used to play a lot of live music. I used to be more into my visual art at the time. I haven't been able to as much, and my creativity in that way kind of comes out in different ways. But I used to be really into visual art and like making art and showing it and painting murals in my city. I used to be really into that. And there was a part of me that really sought the validation of others for my creative abilities. And through this study, I was really able to realize that about myself and come to an understanding that the only validation that I should be seeking is through God. And so it helped me to really turn away from that idol. It helped me to turn away from that unhealthy worshiping of my son, because I did for a really, really long time. And so there's a couple examples that I share from my personal experience about what this study taught me. And, now since we're doing this study together, it's making me realize that, I could possibly be idolizing my own capabilities now that I'm healed from my kratom addiction, and I've recognized it in myself as I've been moving forward, especially in going back to work. But I do see it, and I pray to God every day to, continue to shine a light into my life and to convict me of the things that are wrong. Because, we work in the world, we live in the world, and I will be an ambassador for Jesus wherever I go, but I can't always, when I'm at work, have my faith in talking about Jesus to be the first thing that, I lead in my personality and what I'm doing in work. And so I'm finding that, as I'm getting into my job, and there's a lot of opportunity, thankfully, and, I see a lot of people recognizing my potential. And it's not a pride thing. It's just I'm recognizing that I find myself going, oh, you know what? I can do this. I can accomplish this at my job. And really, it's an everyday surrender and an everyday like humbling myself before God and going, you know what? No, it's you, God. It's you that's leading and strengthening me and guiding me. And I want your will to be done, not mine, and surrendering to that every day. So just sharing something that I'm going through right now. I was very humbled when I was in the depths of my kratom addiction, and I was too sick to work, and half of my hair had fallen out, and it looked like my skin had aged 20 years at that point. I was so humbled because, I was just brought to these depths. And it was really easy for me at that time when I was doing this study for the first time, to not have this, what I'm sharing with you right now, where I'm like, oh, there's a part of me that's like, oh, I got this. And really I'm having to recognize that, is this becoming an idol? Is believing in myself and thinking that I got it, is that becoming an idol in my life? So I'm just sharing with you where I'm at in my part of the process. Where you're at in your part of the process is going to be completely different. But we all have this common ground that we all want to be freed from this addiction and become better people. And so by recognizing what it is that's coming between us and God is a huge part of this process. So this is very heavy, you guys, and I encourage you, if you're following along day by day, I encourage you to take some days. Like, we're going to continue tomorrow, but I encourage you to take some days, take some weeks, take however long it's going to take to really search your soul with God and recognize what these things are that you are putting before God. Because like it says here, that's really interesting and powerful, is that, you know, these idols that come and that they express themselves in different ways through addiction, through, you know, the seeking of validation for these things. It's all because of a root issue. It's all because of that root idol that we are worshiping before God. So this is integral to, you know, our recovery processes. And take some time to think about this and pray about this. I really encourage you to do that. And let us know how you're doing in the comment section. You're welcome to share what your thoughts are about this. I understand this is a very private thing, so, you know, if you don't feel comfortable sharing, that's totally cool. But if you'd like to share, you're welcome to, and we can get, you know, a discussion going about what this looks like for each of us. So I love you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow. And I know this is heavy, but this is good, and it's going to make us better people in the end. Okay, love you. Bye.